Hi, welcome to the channel, and in this video we'll see how you can install and run MySQL using Docker Compose in Ubuntu, right? So let's get started with it. The first thing I'll do is I'll open a terminal, and then we'll see how you can create a Docker Compose file, and like what's the format and how you can set up and run MySQL. So I'm going to create a directory which I'll call MySQL Docker, and I'll open that directory in Sublime Text. All right. The first thing we need to do here is we need to create a Docker Compose file. It's basically a YAML file, and which you specify which image you want to use, and your environment variables like the root password, the user password, the username, and stuff like that. So we'll see. So the way you create a file is you have to specify a name, and which should be exactly docker-compose and .yaml. All right. So the first thing in the Docker Compose file you do is you specify a version. That version is for the template that we'll be using. So I'll be using version 3.7 because it's the latest available. And then in the Docker Compose file, you need to specify all the services that you want to launch using your file. So in services, since we'll be only starting a MySQL container, there will be one service which I'll call DB. And in that DB, you need to specify which image you want to use. So the image that I'm going to use is MySQL. And you need to specify a tag. So the tag that I'll be using will be 8.0.21 because that's the latest available. You can also use latest, so like this. But then every time you run Docker Compose, like even in the future, it will fetch the latest Docker image for MySQL, which is available. I don't want to do that, so I want to stick to one version, which is this one. Then the next thing that you specify here is the port. So the reason you need to do that is because you want to connect to MySQL using a client. So since this MySQL will be running inside a Docker container, you should have a way to connect to it. So what we'll do is we'll map the port of the host machine to a port on the container. So you do that by specifying ports, and it has to be a list of all the ports that you need to map. So the first port that we need to map is 3306, which is the default port for MySQL. Now the port that you mentioned first is the port on your host machine, and the one which you specify after colon is the one belonging to the container, right? So there you go. Then the next thing you need to specify is the root password, right? Because you want to be able to connect to that MySQL container in some way, right? So you need to authenticate yourself. The default username is root. So you do that by specifying environment, and then you specify the root password. You do that by typing MySQL_root_password, and the password I'm going to set it as password. All right. The next thing that you want to specify here is the volumes. So let's just see how to do it, and then I'll explain why you need to do it. So you say volumes, and then it's a list, so there will be only one, and for that I'll create a directory in my MySQL Docker folder. I'll say that it's db data. It's empty for now, so I'll say that map my db data folder, which is dot means the current directory, it's db data, map it to a directory inside the container, which is var lib mysql. So the reason why you need to specify volumes is because when you start a container and you create databases, you create tables, and you stop the container and you remove the container, the data is gone, right? You won't be able to see any databases, any tables once you remove the container. For that, we specify volume. So what happens is when you launch a container, this this directory which is on a host machine is mapped to the directory which is on the container, and then all the data that you write to the MySQL instance, is copied over here, right? So whenever it's mainly it's persisted. So whenever you stop a container, you remove it and start again, your data is persisted. All right. So this is a very important step. All right. I think that should be sufficient for now. There's one more field that I want to mention here, but we will do that later. All right. So let's just see how you can run the container. So I'll clear the screen. So you say docker compose up and -d. Now the -d attribute here is for running this command in background. All right. So it's said, okay, it's creating the container and done. Now the reason it did not download the image is because I already have that image in my local repository. So if I run docker images, you will see a MySQL image that is already downloaded with the same tag, right? It was downloaded 9 days ago. So now that our container is running, there's a command called dockerps using which you can see the running container. So the running container has this name, which is MySQL docker db1, and we have mapped the port 3306 of our host machine to the port 3306 of the container. All right, so let's try to connect to that container. I'm first going to use a command line tool which is called MySQL connector. You can install it on your Ubuntu. So the way you connect to it is basically you say MySQL -h. It's for host. So my host is localhost. So I'll say 1.127.0.0.1. Then I need to specify user, which will be root, and then -p for password. And then you hit enter, and it asks for a password. The password is password, and you enter MySQL shell. All right. Now if I say show databases, I'll see these are the default databases that are there. If I go back to Sublime Text and I expand dbdata, which is already expanded, you can see all these files have been created automatically. Now this is where the data will be persisted, right? So let's go ahead and create a database. So I'll say create database. I'll say db1 and then use db1. Now I'll type show tables. So there are no tables as of now. Let's create one table. So create table test name char 30 age int not null. Also let's keep the name as not null and unique. All right, and then hit enter. So that statement ran fine. Now I'll say show tables. So you can see that table has been created. I can also run describe test to see all the fields and their types and the constraints. So yeah, I can see name is char 30, age is int, null constraint is no, which means it's not null, and the name is unique. That's why the primary as well. And let's insert few records. So I'll say insert into test name age values, say abc 20 xyz 40 pqr 50. All right, and then select star from test. So you can see those 3 records over there. Now let's quit from here and let's stop our container. So you can do that using the Docker container ID, right? So you can say docker stop and the container. So there you go. And I'll also delete the container. So docker ps-a will show you all the stopped container as well. So it says exited 3 seconds ago. I can remove this container using docker rm, and again the same ID. And now the container is gone. But interestingly, the data is still there on our host machine because we mapped it in our docker compose file. So now if I start a docker container again using the docker compose command, Okay, that's good. It's running, and then let's connect to it once again. 127.0.0.1. User is root. Password is password. And if I say show databases, I see db1 because it was persisted using the db data folder. Now I say use db1 show tables, select star from test. So all our data is still there. It's all good. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you was a field called restart, right? Now, why is it necessary is because let's say you want this MySQL container to run always, and you restart your PC, right? This container will be gone. You won't see this running, right? Because you restarted your machine. So the Docker engine also restarts. But if you want this to restart as soon as you restart your machine, you need to specify a field called restart, and the value of that will be always. So now whenever you restart your system, the MySQL container will also be restarted, and you will always have that container up and running no matter how many times you restart your PC. So yeah, cool, that was it, and thank you for watching.